I'm not a good cook. I couldn't build a house if my life depended on it. At least not one anybody would feel comfortable living in. I'm a horrible graphic designer. I just don't really have the eye for it. Come to think of it, there's a lot of things I suck at. But after 25 years of hard-earned lessons, enough mistakes to write a book, and plenty of scar tissue to show, there's one thing I don't suck at. It's business. Now, I've led multinational corporations, co-founded startups that I've raised tens of millions of dollars for, and invested in 17 companies across industries ranging from consumer brands all the way to large-scale manufacturing. And through all that trial and error and time in business, I've learned what actually works. Now, I've been paid $50,000+ in upfront retainers to help companies grow and build and mentor entrepreneurs as well. And I could keep charging for this advice, but I believe those who need it the most are often the ones who can't afford it. So today, I'm gonna be giving it away for free. But before we dive in, let me be honest. Entrepreneurship is super tough. And if you can't make it through this 15-minute video or feels like it's too much for you, then I've got bad news for you, because it doesn't get easier than this. It only gets harder. Okay, first things first. Let's get foundational here and really talk about kind of the idea. Here's where most entrepreneurs kind of trip up. They fall in love with, a great or a cool idea that they have in their head instead of focusing on solving like real world problems. Now, if you want to succeed, you have to solve a problem that affects enough people to create some kind of like sustainable demand. Early in my career, I made that mistake. I started a business that I thought was a cool product, and it was a cool product, but it didn't solve a real problem. And yeah, people liked it, but they didn't care enough about it, or at least enough people didn't care enough about it to part with their money for it. And it wasn't really until I pivoted to a digital model that the business found any kind of real momentum. The reason it did find momentum though, was because I was able to drive down the cost enough to make it more of like an impulse purchase, which then had a knock-on effect of commoditizing the product, which then took the edge off the cool factor. The lesson that I learned though, solve real problems. Don't just have a good idea or a cool idea, because the bigger the problem you can solve, the larger the potential market is that you can address. Now, this leads me to mindset. Now, it's super easy to get excited about a concept or an idea, but the reality is business success isn't just about the idea. You need application and sustainability. And you do that with the right mindset. You need to be persistent. You need to be passionate. Most importantly, adaptable. Most of what traditional education teaches us is how to usually work for someone else. But entrepreneurship is more about like creating your own path, outlining your own structure on how you want to work. You've got to be ready and structure a mindset with really the long game in mind. This is why it's so important to start a business doing something that you love to do. You shouldn't just chase after something because you feel like it's an original idea, or, filling in some gaps in a market that don't align with something that you're super passionate about. For me, it was strategy and finance. So I love turning an idea into like a full financial model to execute on that model. How we're going to generate meaningful revenue, how to diversify those, revenue streams, distribution planning, thinking through kind of operational overheads. I did it because I like to do it and it's fun for me. And from a mental health perspective, it allowed me to stay more engaged for longer periods of time without that additional stress or fatigue, because I enjoyed that. I mean, this is your business. It's your time to decide what it is you want to do and what you don't want to do. So choose something that you'll love to do, and you'll save yourself from a quick burnout. I can promise you that. All right, so you have your idea. You've identified the problem or problems that you want to solve. Now what we have to do is we have to validate that idea. Now, before you fully build out, before you raise money, before you take on debt, you're going to want to test. Now, there's a term in business called minimum viable product. You've probably heard of it. It's called MVP for short. But the reason the term exists is because you're going to want to create a minimum element or a minimum viable product that you have, which is, essentially the core component of what your offer is. And you're going to want to get that in front of real customers as soon as possible to test your product, because you're going to need that practical, real world feedback and not just assumptions of what you think are going to happen. I mean, whenever you build or create something, it will always make more sense to you than it does to other people. All the time. Entrepreneurs take for granted and make assumptions of what people should know about the product that they're putting out there, when the reality is it's not always that way. That's why testing is so important. So many times people will build a product or, offer a service or whatever, they put it out there into the market and there's no meaningful feedback or testing. then when it doesn't work, or even if it does work, they don't know why. They never really got a sample set of data back to be able to measure that product or service that they put out there. You need as many data points as possible to understand how you can improve to give your product the best shot at being successful before kind of going to market. The good news is there are ways to test your product and ways to test it inexpensively. Depending upon what it is you want to offer, depends on the mechanism that you'll use to test, but think of things like landing pages, surveys, even producing some social media content to gauge interest and see. And if people aren't excited to pay for what your solution is, you're either targeting the wrong people or you're solving the wrong problem. Let me tell you why it's so key to test as inexpensively as possible. In business, it's not about how hard you swing, but often how many times you get to step up to the plate. Now, you may think that you have the best end-all, be-all kind of idea. When you go to market, you may find a very different outcome than you would expect. I can't tell you how many times I've worked with entrepreneurs who wish they tested more or tested at all before going to market with their product, because they wasted this precious capital that they had promoting an untested product or service, only to find out what they could have learned before going to market with some inexpensive testing. They ended up wasting their money and the financial runway they had on making improvements that could have been easily discoverable problems had they just done some testing beforehand. I do, however, want to caveat this point with a famous quote by Reid Hoffman. He's the co-founder of LinkedIn. And he said, if you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product, then you've launched too late. So my point is, don't get stuck in analysis paralysis either, right? You got to shoot for a balance between testing enough to validate your MVP and minimizing costs while you're doing it, and rushing into launch without any testing at all. Make sure you find the balance there, because it's easy to run in either extreme of not testing or being, paralyzed with testing and testing and testing and never getting to market. You don't want that to be the case. Now, that said, you may do all the things right? You think you have the good idea, feels like, you're addressing the right market, the market's big enough. You do the testing as inexpensively as possible, only to find out that there's no market adoption for it. I mean, it happens, right? But that is exactly why you need to go through this early process as inexpensively as possible without breaking the bank. That way you can preserve as much money as possible to give yourself a chance to step back up to the plate again for the next idea that you might have. And don't be discouraged if your first or even your fifth attempt doesn't succeed. Think of Ted Williams, right? He's one of baseball's greatest hitters. He had a batting average at the peak of his career of 406, meaning that he got a hit 40.6% of the times that he was at bat. It was an incredible feat. It was unbelievable. But that still means he missed 60% of the time while at bat. Well, business is similar. It may take you several tries to succeed, so focus on giving yourself as many opportunities as possible. Because the less money you spend testing an idea, the more chances you have at getting back up at base to get that hit for whatever your home run's going to be. Now let's talk about scaling your business. When it comes to scaling, it's not just about sales that you need to scale. It's about systems. You can't be everywhere all at once. So you need processes in place for customer service, for sales support, fulfillment, all of those things. And that enables you to scale without adding any chaos or confusion to the process. Another point regarding infrastructure. This is in relation to people. You're going to want to keep this term in mind because it's super important and it'll always be applicable, right? You're going to want to hire slow and fire fast. One bad hire can set you back months and even pollute other productive employees' feelings towards the business. But the right hire can have a multiplier effect. So think about that. Hire slow, measure twice, cut once, fire fast. So the one thing I always look for when I'm hiring people is what type of attitude they have and are they hungry? Because look, skills can be taught specifically as it relates to what you want them to do for your business. But motivation and drive, that's instinctual. You need that. Also, don't be afraid to outsource. I'm a huge fan of outsourcing just for the right reasons. But keep your core competencies, always keep your core competencies kind of in-house, right? Now, I've outsourced warehousing and logistics, for example, and it was great. It was amazing. But I've also outsourced our sales and marketing, and it was terrible because we were just another product on their list of things that they sold. and it lost connection with the customer. I mean, it's hard to be passionate about one product or company when you're selling 5 different products for 5 different companies. So be thoughtful in what you choose to outsource. It's a key thing. Now we're going to move into sales and marketing, right? So everyone can sell. It's 100% a skill that can be learned. Don't let anybody tell you different. The trick is to sell the experience or the outcome, not just the product. You see, people buy stories. They buy on emotion. They buy for solutions. That's why marketing is critical. You know, an old boss of mine used to say, 50% of my marketing budget works. The problem is, I just don't know which 50%. Now, what he was getting at was 50% of your efforts might be wasted, but it's the other 50 that gets results. And sometimes it's not clear which one that is. So focus on storytelling, how your product will make your customer's life better or easier, right? Make it a solution that they've been looking for all along. They just didn't know it. A great example of how effective storytelling is done in the market is look at Apple's launch of iPhone, right? Instead of focusing solely on technical specifications, which would have pitted them directly against whoever the competitors were at the time, like Motorola or Samsung or whoever, Apple told a story. They told a story of how the iPhone will change the users' lives. Right? Their messaging was really smart. It's brilliant, actually, because they emphasized that it wasn't just a phone, but it was a tool for communication, creativity, convenience, and productivity. Essentially, a solution people didn't know they needed. But when they learned about it, they couldn't do without it. So by presenting the iPhone as a way to simplify and enhance their life, they created arguably one of the most powerful connections with the brand in history, because they were making customers feel that the product is what they'd been waiting for. And it's still the case, even 16 versions of the iPhone later. But every piece of content should be all pieces of a bigger story reflecting that solution or transformation that the product's going to give the customer, whether it be a testimonial, whether it be an ad or product or demo or whatever. And in today's world, it's so easy to use digital tools now. I mean, it's way better than 10 or 15 years ago, because like Facebook ads, they all have A/B testing. And that will show you what works. So it really takes a lot of that guesswork out of it. Now, I want to go back to mindset for a second, because it's so important to have the right mindset, the right entrepreneurial mindset when you're starting your own business. You'll hear terms all the time like failure is the opposite of success, or it's all a part of the journey. But the fact is, if you distill it all down and eliminate all the kind of fluffy, fuzzy, feel-good talk, the most successful entrepreneurs, bar none, are the ones who keep going. They persevere, they push through, even when all the chips are down. Now, look, personally, I've had businesses tank. I've gotten punched in the face with failed efforts. It sucks. It's embarrassing. It's depressing. And I could tell you something anecdotal like pick yourself up by the bootstraps, or, dust yourself off, sure. But sometimes when you're coming off a loss, those kinds of comments are kind of annoying. The truth is, I got back up because I got angry. I mean, they say you're only as good as your last effort. Well, I wasn't going to let that last effort define me. And in the event something isn't going my way, now what I like to remember is that you either win or you learn. And any failures that I've dealt with gave me a lesson that I needed to know, so that the next time I did it, I knew at least what not to do. Now, it's natural to get frustrated or depressed, but the key is how quickly you can push through those feelings and get back and try it again. I mean, one thing that has helped me is I take instead of when people say the win or lose, I replace the lose with learn, right? It feels different, it feels less negative, and it makes you less afraid to take chances, right? So I'm winning or I'm learning, and I replace that losing for learning, and it helps me kind of recover quickly, and it also makes me unafraid to take those chances. Now, you'll also want to keep your motivation high as often as you can by taking in information that helps you kind of learn more, stay more, with your finger to the pulse. Now, the way I do this is I stay curious, and I'm always open to learn. I'm open to learn every single day. I consume books, I listen to podcasts, I watch videos that I like, because here's the deal. The market changes, technology changes, and it's super important that you be adaptable. Adaptability is key, because there's so many changes, and that's one of the big attributes you want to focus on. Entrepreneurship is a marathon, not a sprint. And you don't want to chase quick wins at the expense of long-term success. You want to really focus your efforts on something that, quite frankly, is going to last, right? So to wrap this up, I'm going to tell you, that the businesses that succeed aren't just focused on profits. They're focused on purpose as well. That's why it's important to find something that you love, because having a passion and purpose will motivate you and help keep you motivated through your journey. And yeah, I mean, look, luck, sure, that's a factor and it helps. But you can also make your own luck, right? You make your own luck by being relentless, being persistent, knowing where you want to go and taking calculated risks in order to get there. And if you can delay gratification, you can like upscale your wins later. I mean, just look at companies like Facebook and Amazon. They didn't chase early profits, right? They built solid foundations and then reap the reward. I mean, today they're two of the most valuable companies in the world. So look, I hope you found some value in my video. And more importantly, I hope it helps you create something really great. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below and I'll do my best to respond. But keep building, stay motivated, and take care.